Perfect. All right, everyone. Well, again, thank you for joining us today. My name is Fati Mendoza. I am the Director of Alumni Affairs with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. I get the pleasure to work with all of the folks here joining us today on the panel and in leading our overall alumni engagement efforts. So I'm really excited to be here with all of you and being able to provide you with additional information and resources on the Presidential Management Fellows Program. So with that, I want to introduce all of our panelists and guests that are here with us today. So our first guest, who I will introduce, is Adam Sotomayor. Adam, current role is in the Office of the Assistant Secretary, Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, U.S. Department of State. I will go ahead and read Adam's bio now as we go through. At the U.S. Department of State, Adam has worked with the National Security Council, interagency, nonprofits, think tanks, multilateral organizations, implementation partners, and U.S. mission and foreign government overseas to advance global counterterrorism, political military, public diplomacy, economic development, sanctions, and human rights objectives for the United States. Adam currently supports the Assistant Secretary of Education and Cultural Affairs in advancing U.S. foreign policy objectives through educational, professional, cultural, and sports exchanges that create partnership and promote mutual understanding between the people of the United States and people of other nations. Adam is an alumnus of the French American Foundation Young Leaders Program, International Career Advancement Program, U.S. Spain Council Young Leaders Program, and Presidential Management Fellows Program. Adam graduated from the University of Florida with a master's in international business and bachelor's of science in finance, and was recently named a top 40 under 40 alum. So let's welcome Adam for joining us here today. Next, we have Israel Neri. Israel Neri was born in Compton and raised in Los Angeles. As a first-generation student, he graduated with a business degree from California State University, Monterey Bay, where he was part of the men's soccer team. He also completed his graduate studies at Woodbury University and the University of Illinois College of Law. He served as a 2014-2015 Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute Law Fellow, where he served on the House Financial Services Committee. Upon completing the CHCI Fellowship, he served as Presidential Management Fellow from 2015 to 2017 with the U.S. Small Business Administration and Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He recently transitioned to the private sector and now serves as a management consultant manager for Central Federal Services. He also serves as a commissioned officer in the Army Reserve. Thank you, Israel, for being here with us. Next, we have Tracy Sanchez, who is originally from East Los Angeles and is a first-generation college student and professional. Tracy began her educational journey at Pasadena City College and then transferred to UCLA, where she received a bachelor's in ethnic studies and a master's degree in higher education and organizational change. As a Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute graduate fellow from the years of 2014 to 2015, Tracy served on the House Committee on Education and Labor and the White House Initiative on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity for Hispanics. Upon completing her CHCI Fellowship, she participated in the Presidential Management Fellowship, where she served as a fellow at the Department of Labor Women's Bureau. Today, Tracy is a performance auditor for the Government Accountability Office. At GAO, Tracy produces reports and policy recommendations that Congress uses to inform legislation related to foster youth, military child care, illegal use of virtual currency, and abuse in amateur athletics. Tracy considers herself a lifelong learner and is passionate about supporting diversity and inclusion efforts in the federal government. And lastly, to round us out, we are also joined by Brandon Jacobsen, who serves as the Application, Communications, and Outreach Lead for Presidential Management Fellows program, is also an alum from PMF in the office of OPM HR Solutions, and is our expert in all things PMF today. So let's give them a virtual round of applause for joining us today. Thank you again all for being here. So with that, dove right into introductions and want to let you all know that we will, we welcome questions throughout the session. Brandon's going to be kicking us off with sharing an overview of PMF, and then we have a set questions for our panelists, but at any point, please feel free to chime in the chat. And we have also ensured that we've allocated sufficient time at the end as well. But by all means, please chime in with your questions at any point. So with that, I will pass it off to Brandon.
Okay, thank you so much, Patty. It's great to be with all of you today and with the panelists as well. Thanks for taking time out of your night to learn about the Presidential Management Fellows Program. So what I'm going to do is just give you kind of an overview of what the program is and talk a little bit about the upcoming application cycle. I won't do this, formally through a slide deck, since, we have a great, crowd here for this kind of more personal, intimate conversation. But in case you do want to reference some of those formal resources later, I put those in the chat. There's a link there to the Become a PMF resources page. The number one most important thing that you want to review if you're thinking about applying is the PMF applicant handbook. So I kind of highlighted that there. That's kind of your go-to resource that talks about the application process, eligibility, required documentation, all of that. So definitely make sure to go through that a couple of times prior to the application. I will note kind of right here, right off the top, that the application launches on the 13th of September, so in less than a month, and it will be open from the 13th to the 27th of September. It opens and closes at noon Eastern time. So this is a really great time to start thinking about the program in preparation for applying about a month before. That's perfect. And so I just want to highlight those dates, and I'll probably say it again just to reiterate and make sure everybody has that kind of date marked on their calendars. But just to start, the PMF program is really at heart the federal government's main tool for recruiting and developing the next generation of federal government leaders from all segments of society. That is what this program's been all about since 1978, when President Carter launched it. Back then, it was called the Presidential Management Intern Program. So if you ever hear the PMI acronym getting thrown around, that's the same thing. It was just called something different back then. But this is what the government uses to provide a pipeline of future leaders across all agencies for the most part. And so, if that's something that you're interested in, this is a great option to kind of launch your career in federal government. And what I also like to say is that it's also a good way to test drive a career in the civil service or in the kind of executive branch side of government, because it's a 2-year fellowship. And then at the end of that 2 years, you have the option to convert and become a permanent federal employee. But for those of you who are saying, well, I don't know if I'm wanting to commit 20, 30 plus years to the federal government, this is just a great way to kind of test it out, see what it's like. If you love it, at the end, you have a really unique permanent pathway in. And if not, you've got some great experience in the civil service kind of under your belt. And so basically what this is, it's a federal job, right? So it's a 2-year fellowship at a federal agency, but it's really a federal job plus. because you're getting the full salary and benefits that any other federal employee would get. But the program, that 2 years, is really focused on developing you into a leader, and also hitting on some of that technical training that's related to whatever your role is. And you're going to hear about some of the different roles that PMF serve in from our amazing alumni here today. But during that 2 years, you've got a number of additional things. That's why I mentioned Federal Job Plus, because you have 160 hours of training and development that you get to do as part of that 2 years. So 80 hours per year. Again, some of that is leadership development training. Some of that is technical training related to your role. You'll also have a senior level mentor that you're paired with during the 2 years of the fellowship, which is another great benefit. And then one thing that makes PMF really unique is what's called the developmental assignment. And so you get to, during a 4 to 6 month period, go to a different part of government altogether, or a different part of your agency, to get some additional exposure that'll help kind of develop you into your home role. And PMFs do all kinds of different things during that 4 to 6 months. And perhaps panelists will touch on what they did. Many times it's going to another executive branch agency. When I did the fellowship, I actually went to the Senate and did my developmental assignment for 6 months on the Hill to get some exposure to the legislative side. But there's a lot of different things that you can do. And some agencies actually offer their fellows more than one of those rotations. So they might do that 4 to 6 that's required, but then do another shorter term optional rotation. So all kinds of really unique opportunities within the bounds of the fellowship. And then the other really great benefit is you're kind of automatically plugged into this network of PMFs. PMFs are all over government, current and PMF alumni. We've had over 11,000 individuals that have gone through this program since its inception in 1978. And so what's really nice about coming into the executive branch of the federal government through this program is that you've got this ready-made community right there to help you out, to get to know, to work with professionally, to get to know personally. And so that's something that's really hard to put a value on. It's really amazing. So that's kind of, what the PMF program is. A lot of times we get asked, where do fellows work, right? And the truth is they work everywhere in government. So, we've worked with over 100 federal agencies across government. And certainly there are places that, place a lot of PMFs. For example, the Department of Health and Human Services, they place a lot of PMFs. The Department of State, the USAID, the Department of Agriculture. So certainly all of the cabinet level agencies place PMFs, but really anywhere you can think of. And so no matter what your background is, this isn't just an opportunity for public administration, public policy. This is really for all academic disciplines. So, we have a lot of folks with backgrounds in public policy, public administration, law, international affairs, but also people that come in with STEM backgrounds or come in with, public health backgrounds. And so that's what's kind of nice about it, is it's a very wide net in terms of who we're bringing in. So let me talk a little bit about the application process itself. And I don't want to take too much of the time because I want to, myself hear from our amazing panelists, but just so that you're prepared for this application when it does launch in September. So as I mentioned, the application is open for a period of 2 weeks. So the 13th to the 17th of September. During that time period, you're going to submit some required documentation. Two of the most important things are resume, and then the second thing is a transcript. For the resume, it can be in any format as long as it contains the elements that are spelled out in the applicant handbook. For the transcript, same thing. It just has to contain, 4 elements that are required. And one thing I will say specifically about the transcript, and this is a good reason why, being here and thinking about this early is a good idea. The transcript has to include what's called, for us, the anticipated graduation date or the anticipated degree completion date. So if you're a current graduate student, it has to show when you anticipate finishing your advanced degree. If you're a recent grad student, it also has to have the date that you completed that advanced degree. That's the number one most common mistake that we see is folks submitting a transcript without the degree completion date. So just make sure that your transcript has that. And if it doesn't, then you just get a letter from your academic institution that spells out, hey, Tracy is a student at this university in this program and is expecting to complete her advanced degree on this date. And all of that, again, is spelled out really in a detailed way in the handbook. But I definitely make sure to pay attention for that. And then other documentation for if you're requesting a reasonable accommodation or you're claiming veterans preference, those types of things may come into play as well. But in terms of the application itself, as part of it, there is an assessment process. And it happens in 2 stages. So during the open application period, that September 13th to 27th, you'll go through what's called the online assessment. And so the online assessment has 2 parts to it. There's a situational assessment tool that we use, and then a behavioral assessment tool that we use. And those 2 parts of the online assessment you'll do during the open application period itself. And then those who are successful during that first stage, what we do then is we're going to announce semifinalists. And so semifinalists will be announced probably about a month after the application closes. And those who are selected as semifinalists will go through a structured interview process. And so the structured interview happens and over the course of a few months. And then once that's done, we announce and select finalists for the program. When it comes to the assessment, whether we're talking about the online assessment or the structured interview, what we're really looking for are some key leadership competencies that we've found have been critical to success on the job as a PMF. So when you think about what is this assessment all about, it's about evaluating for those competencies, things like attention to detail, oral communication, supporting diversity. There's 8 of them, and these are all spelled out as well in the handbook. But when you think about how to be successful in the application process, what you really want to think about is, how do I put my best foot forward in showcasing these 8 competencies through the online assessment and the structured interview? That's, I think, one of the most important keys to success in this process, is really understanding what those competencies are and then figuring out how to really showcase those through the assessment process. So that's kind of how folks are evaluated. In terms of eligibility to apply for the program, you either have to be a current graduate student or a recent graduate student. And that's defined by OPM in this way. So to be a current graduate student, that means that you expect to finish your advanced degree, your master's, PhD, JD, by August 31st of 2023. That would be the current graduate category. So by the end of next summer. For a recent graduate, that would be anyone who has completed an advanced degree within 2 years of the application launch. So anytime between September 13th, 2020 and September 13th, 2022. So since that is sometimes just overly confusing. I get confused myself when I'm explaining it sometimes. The full range of eligibility dates is September 13th, 2020 to August 31st, 2023. If you completed or expect to complete an advanced degree within that time frame, then you'd be eligible to apply for the program. So that's kind of how that works. And then, the other thing that I'll mention is, if you become a finalist at the end of the day, after, going through the online assessment, you become a semifinalist, you get the interview under your belt, and you become a finalist, the way that this works is that you have a full year to find your PMF job, your PMF appointment. And you'll have access to what's called the PMF talent management system, which is basically, you can think of it as a mini USA Jobs, if you're familiar with USA Jobs. Hopefully a little bit easier to work in, at least that's what we hope. But you'll see agencies posting PMF jobs throughout that year of your eligibility, and you just express interest for the ones that you want to apply for. And so it's totally up to you whether you apply for 5 or you apply for 100. That's totally something that you can kind of determine. And what's nice is you're really just competing within that pool of PMF finalists. So when you apply for a job on USA Jobs in the federal government, you could potentially be competing with thousands of people. And for PMF, it's a much smaller pool, and it's a very diverse pool, because you got folks with environmental science backgrounds that really just want to work at EPA or USDA or DOE, or folks that have international affairs backgrounds that really want to work at state, USAID, Treasury, etc. And so one of the great advantages of coming in through PMF is if you do become a finalist, you're going to have all kinds of opportunities to apply for these jobs. We do recommend that if you do become a finalist, that you cast a wide net, apply for many jobs, right? Especially if you take someone who's interested in international affairs. Don't just limit yourself to the Department of State or USAID, because almost every federal agency has some kind of international affairs facing component to it. So you could look at commerce, you could look at the Foreign Agricultural Service, you could look at all kinds of different options. So that's just one thing that we would recommend. So those are kind of some of the basics. The last thing I would say just about resources, one is, what I mentioned here, the applicant handbook, that's number one, start there and kind of build out from there. But there are a lot of other resources on our website under that resources page and under the entire Become a PMF section of the website. And the last thing I'll say is we also have what's called the PMF Ambassadors program. And PMF ambassadors are basically PMFs and PMF alumni who raise their hand and volunteer to support our recruitment and outreach efforts. And we actually have about 200 PMF ambassadors this year. And so we have a full directory on our website of those individuals that you can go, and I'll post the link here in the chat, but you can go and just reach out to some of these individuals to have conversations, email exchanges, and do that based on, who has a similar academic background or who works at an agency that I really want to end up at. And that's another really great way to kind of just understand what this is all about, what the PMF experience looks like in a specific place or at a specific agency. So I would definitely encourage you, if you'd like to do that, to feel free to take advantage of that network, and we even have some ambassadors on the call. But it's a really great network, and people that are passionate about PMF and public service. So that's the other one I'd mention. So I'm going to stop there, and I'll hang around to hear the conversation. I'm really excited about that, and I'll also keep an eye on the chat in case there are questions that you have about the program requirements, etc. And I'll try my best to answer those as well. So thanks again, everybody, and wish you all the best of luck. And I'll turn it back over to Patty.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate your time and your thoroughness and explaining the program and really the logistics. That's sometimes where we get really hung up, right? The in the weeds details. So I appreciate that. And you're sticking around to be available for questions that might come up. So with that, I am going to go ahead and move us into our Q&A portion of this session. Like I said, we have a couple questions already lined out to get us started with learning more from our PMF alums, a little bit about their experience and guidance. So with that, first question we have is, why PMF? What attracted you to the PMF opportunity? And any of y'all that would like to start first?
I can get us kicked off if that's okay. So in terms of my end, when I was going through the CHCI fellowship, one of my friends told me, "Hey, have you thought of PMF?" I had never heard of PMF before then. And when I researched it and saw the opportunities that it offered, it really aligned with what I sort of identified with in terms of being very mission driven in terms of public service. And so I felt that this was a logical next step to move forward in my public service career and work for the federal government, something that I wanted to do when I was in graduate school. So it met sort of like two of the big aspects that I wanted to really complete, which was A, do something that's mission oriented for the public service, and two, do it at the federal level, especially because I had worked on the Hill and saw how important federal agencies play, how important of a role they play in terms of administering a lot of the government programs that a lot of us benefit from.
I could go next. So I think for me, so a little background, I'm originally from LA. So I moved to DC, had just finished the CHCI fellowship and, was interested in staying in DC. But DC is expensive. And so is LA. So I was really looking for kind of an opportunity that could offer some kind of economic stability. I was looking around and some of the things that, were on the Hill or other places, they didn't have like a clear kind of pathway for me to kind of map out like promotions, retirement, things like that were important for me that I didn't have. And so I felt like PMF had kind of some of that safety net in that they're really clear on the opportunities. And then you also had the opportunity to do a rotation, which I had never heard of, which is basically 6 months of you having a brand new job at a complete different agency. You're getting paid, you still have all your benefits, and you basically get to like choose from a pool of agencies that you probably wouldn't have an opportunity to go work for unless you had like very specific experience. I had kind of a very social science background, so sometimes people don't know what to do with you. They don't automatically think public policy when they look at like an ethnic studies degree or a higher education degree. So I felt like PMF was a good way for me to jump into a career that I probably wouldn't otherwise have like a really good chance if I just went on like USA Jobs and like submitted my resume, which was nice. And I also like that it just ultimately had like a really structured format of you're going to get a mentor, you're going to get a certain amount of training, they're going to train you on the job. Like the expectations that you're not coming in as an expert, because we all feel sometimes like just intimidated by like all the duties and expectations on the posting, and then you start thinking like, wait, I don't check all of these, so maybe I don't qualify. But PMF is a good way to kind of get your feet wet and kind of build you up so that you have all those competencies once you kind of hit those 2 years. So I felt like all of that for me sounded great, and it turned out great. So
yeah, good evening, everyone. At the time I learned about the PMF program, I was actually working as an account executive with CNN in Miami. And it was approximately 2 months before the deadline, and I didn't find out about it until 2 years after I had finished my grad degree. So and I literally just met the cutoff in order to apply. Had I known before, I would have applied, as I was finishing my graduate degree, to have much more opportunities in case I didn't get it the first time. I could apply again up to 2 more times to have a better opportunity, which is why even if you're not sure that you want to work in government, you should apply early and often. In the event that you might not work out the first time, you still have 2 other opportunities to get into the program. What attracted me to it was the fact that there's really so many opportunities that are potentially available to you. I knew I wanted to work with the U.S. government doing something in international affairs, but I didn't know what role I would qualify for, and also, what role I truly wanted to take on. So when I looked at USA Jobs, it was a bit daunting because you have to look for a specific position, and then you have to figure out, do I qualify for that, and then try to build a resume. Whereas with the PMF program, you can take the experiences you do have, apply, and as long as you're addressing the core competencies that they're asking for, and do well in the assessment, you'll have the opportunity to become a finalist. And in that process, you'll have the opportunity to really navigate and see what opportunities are out there, and be considered for multiple opportunities. So it really allows you to keep an open mind and see what's out there. And of course, once you're in the program, the opportunity to do rotations, leadership training, and the fact that there is a pipeline for you to be promoted up to a GS13 by the time you finish the program is truly incredible. Like no other program out there will allow you that kind of rapid advancement in government. And it really just opens up the door for you to take on so many opportunities. Since I've gotten into the program, I've had 5 different jobs in different areas. I've worked overseas, domestically. So that just goes to show you the opportunities the PMF program will provide you. The key is just to get into the program in an agency of your choice, ideally, but have an open mind, because any agency you get into will provide you with a bunch of opportunities to really figure out what it is you're passionate about. And once you're in, it's much easier to move around the government than from the outside.
Thank you all very much for sharing. So now that you've talked a little bit about, why PMF, I'd like to, have you all share a little bit more about what are some of the leadership opportunities that you enjoyed the most while, participating in PMF?
So I'll get kicked off again. So on my end, when I joined SBA, it was, to be frank, it wasn't an agency that I thought I was going to be joining as a PMF. Financial services background, legal background, I thought I was going to be going treasury, FinCEN, and doing a lot of white collar, money laundering, sort of law and policy. And then SBA somehow fell in the lap and maybe an offer, and actually sort of resonated with sort of the mission they had and what I felt would be a logical next step in a public service oriented career. And what I liked about it was, and every PMF experience is unique, is that I actually got to work at a very high level. Like my first placement with an SBA was with the office of the Honorable Maria Contreras Sweet, who was the SBA administrator at that time. So I initially went there and had a small portfolio of policy issues that she wanted me to help advise on, and then that grew exponentially. And so that was a great experience in terms of leading those policy efforts and implementing that into her work and initiatives. And then ultimately what led me to go to the private sector was one of the things I felt that I enjoyed was during my PMF experience was leading efforts to basically improve program offices, whether it was them having a lot of inspector general complaints or GAO, having a lot of findings on them in terms of, hey, you need to improve this and that because it's antiquated and people are not getting the services they need. That was something I really enjoyed. And so that's something that I kept doing when I was still in federal government, and ultimately it led me to what I felt was the logical next step, private sector. But that's what I really enjoyed, was policy and driving policy initiatives, and also just helping improve program offices to ensure that those offices better serve the constituents that they were tasked with helping.
I can go next. I feel like we're going in an order, and I might as well not mess up the the vibe that's going. And hi, Caroline. She just joining. She was part of the CHCI, or kind of cohort. I wanted to do a shout out. So I think in terms of leadership opportunities, like Israel was saying, I think when you come in as a PMF, the expectation is that you are being trained to be a leader, and that you're going to be, in theory, with the agency for many years. And there is a lot of folks who are in very senior positions that were former PMF. So they're not treating you like an intern. And that's probably why they changed the name, because, the expectation is you're being treated as a full-blown professional at the table who is contributing from day one, which is a little scary at first, but I think it's great that that tone is set, because then that means you're not kind of thrown into like a little cube at the, in the back doing kind of busy work. You're really, like, the expectation is that they're going to bring you into the big meetings. They're going to kind of put you in charge of projects. And ultimately that they're going to train you to do the job. So there's a lot of kind of shadowing and, assigning you with formal mentors and things like that. So I think that is super helpful just to know, because that's kind of one of the things that attracted to me. But I think in terms of leadership for me, as soon as I started, I feel like they were giving me really meaningful work. So I was able to lead some of their research around women in different employment sectors. And then we also did a ton of like technical assistance for women in non-traditional, jobs, such as like construction, IT, and things like that. And those are things I cared about and never thought that I could get paid to actually do. Kind of came from a gender studies background and thought, you always hear people say, like, what are you going to do with that? Who's going to pay you? But ultimately, federal government touches every topic, women's employment and everything kind of beyond that. So for me, being able to get assigned some of those really cool projects was awesome, because I was passionate about them, and I felt like whatever I had to say in terms of decision making was going to be taken pretty seriously. So I think I would kind of just echo Israel in terms of just coming in as a PMF. There's a lot of weight to kind of the title, and obviously responsibility with that too. But you will be given a lot of formal opportunities.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with both Tracy and Israel. I think the opportunities you get from the very first day are that of a fellow. And they really do look at you as someone to not just take on a specific portfolio, but someone that can potentially step in and take on other things as well. So you're not limited in the skill sets that you can cultivate. You're given multiple opportunities to work on budget, grants, programs, communication, social media. There's really a wide variety of topics. So even if there's a position you get offered that you're like, I'm not really interested in doing finance, that doesn't mean that's all you're going to do. You'll have plenty of opportunity to expand beyond that. And ultimately have that flexibility through the rotations in the programs, the trainings, to be able to potentially land in a different position at the end of your fellowship if needed. But also the opportunity to work with leaders from different backgrounds. The government has political appointees in leadership. They have career civilians in leadership, career foreign service officers, in some cases even contractors. You're going to get exposure to the leadership styles of all of these different folks. And in many ways, your team might consist of folks from each of these different areas, which is really fascinating, because you get to really understand how those positions work, and sort of how you fit in. And you get to, and with the comfort of knowing that you're part of a fellowship that provides the security that comes with government. So it really does position you to not only learn from some incredible leaders who have worked on campaigns or who have entered through contracting, but also really dive in and take on different roles. Even if you're not 100% sure of how to do it, they'll provide you with the training and the folks to shadow to really master the skill sets.
Thank you all for sharing. as you all started to share, and as we heard from, as I was reading everyone's bios and all the amazing work that you've done and continue to do in the community, can you share some tangible examples of ways that participating in PMF set you up for life post the fellowship? You all started to talk a little bit about the skills you were learning during. How did you apply that in the work that you all are currently doing?
Sure, great. I'll get us kicked off. On my end, I come from a legal background, and frankly, I thought was do a couple placements with an SBA, and then after that, go to a federal agency and be legal counsel, and that'll be it. But one of the things that, even though I did enjoy that time, one of the things I actually did enjoy a lot was process improvement within organizations and program offices, and I just developed a really good habit and reputation with an SBA of, hey, there's a problem at this office, or there's process improvement, or underperforming employees, and we need someone to go there and really help lift the performance up. And I was like, hey, just get Israel Neri. And so I would go there and lift up, and basically try to identify the issues that existed at that time, and then implement solutions. And then from there, whatever the problem was usually solved, and what's on its way to at least being up to standard. And for me, one of the biggest things was the pandemic. During the pandemic, the SBA was tasked with basically carrying out a lot of the economic assistance through the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And then at the district level, I was basically in touch with, hey, like, this is new, this is out of the blue, and we don't know what we're going to do for outreach efforts. So because of my history and reputation, I was basically in task with, hey, what are the outreach efforts that we're going to do, particularly for communities that necessarily don't trust government that much. And I'm talking about, like, low to moderate income communities, particularly immigrant communities in Los Angeles and Ventura and Santa Barbara County. And so I was able to establish and promote those outreach efforts that I was tasked with leading it with great success, and basically keeping a lot of small businesses open. So that was a great opportunity. And then from there, the opportunity came to take that to private sector and basically work with other federal agencies that sort of had identified those type of needs, and where someone can, like myself, with track history I had, could come in and basically consult and provide solutions to their problems. So that's what I would say in a holistic version of what PMF was able to help me out with.
I think for me, so I was at the Department of Labor and the Women's Bureau, and a lot of people haven't heard of the Women's Bureau because it's this tiny little agency. We're not, I want to say we have like 50 staff, or had 50 staff. Our budget is pretty small when you really compare it to all the other agencies. So our big focus is research and some tiny grants for nonprofits who basically try to get women into non-traditional careers. And so for me, while I was a PMF, I was able to work on some of the research. And at first, just like doing research in federal government was very new. I kind of came from academia, from having like a master's, where I think sometimes we do research for the sake of research. It's not, very like applicable. Federal government is different because obviously there's like all these funding rules and all the kind of red tape that goes along with doing any type of study. But I feel like that kind of prepared me for the position that I have now, which is at the Government Accountability Office. So basically we're auditors, but kind of at our core, we do research because we have to evaluate programs. So we are generalists, which is pretty awesome because we get to get assigned to any type of program. And so I work on education and human services topics. So I've been able to do basically audits of things related to like foster youth, or even help out with the pandemic with COVID-19 affected a lot of our meat and poultry factories. So being able to interview poultry workers and figure out like what can OSHA be, what could they do better to protect some of these workers from, injuries, but also COVID related things. So having the experience of being at the Department of Labor and doing that kind of research prepared me for what I am doing now, and that a lot of the skills were transferable, but also just being able to work in teams. So being able to work with folks from different generations, different skill sets, being able to work with different just work styles, because I think a lot of being a leader is, being able to work across different kind of sectors, and be able to be nimble. So I feel like some of the transferable kind of tangible research skills that I learned, but then also just the more soft skills of working with people, just communication, things like that. So I feel like the 2 years PMF just set me up really nicely for now GAO, which has been, I think I attribute a lot of just like me being pretty good at what I'm doing now as just PMF.
Yeah, there's no question that the program puts you in a position not only for rapid advancement into a senior leadership role in terms of rank, but more importantly, being able to learn so many new skills and really help you identify what truly is like your passion. Like, what is that area of work that interests you the most? I was brought in to do communications work for the Secretary's Office of Global Partnerships. And immediately upon the first month of starting, I was pulled to do grants management work for some of our partnerships or working with our program implementers. And what I found was, in many ways, everyone on our team was considered a generalist. There were things that we worked on, but we were expected to be knowledgeable of all the areas of the office to be able to cover for each other. So at the time, it was nerve-wracking to take on so many different new skills so quickly, and have that pressure of like, am I going to do well? Especially when you're working with political appointees and folks that have served in Congress before. But you do learn to adapt, and everyone's really understanding, and there's a lot of people you can ask questions to and shadow. So that was fantastic, but it really opened up doors for me to get my first rotation overseas at our U.S. Embassy in Paraguay, doing human rights reporting as a political officer. Just some of the skill sets I was developing working with foreign service officers, and being able to really build that network helped me land that rotation. And of course, when I went to the embassy overseas, it was my first time, working on reporting on human rights, labor, and other issues for our bilateral relationship. But that then allowed me to network with so many other diplomats and foreign service officers, which move around every 2 to 3 years. So that allowed me to really build my network. And it was through that rotation in Paraguay that I received the recommendation to work with the Director General of the Foreign Service. So that ended up being my next rotation. So a lot of my rotations, for me at least, came from recommendations from the network and the people I was working with on a daily basis. And that's what's great about government is, regardless of what your specific skill set is, you get to work with people doing so many other things, and they see your work ethic, they see how well you work as a team and get things done, and they're willing to give you a chance down the road when they're in a different assignment. And it was through that rotation in the Director General's office that I ended up staying with the Director General and converted as a civil service employee at the GS-13 level, and getting perspective there allowed me to work with so many other people within not only the Department of State, but the interagency because of the nature of its operational focus. And that helped me to eventually land another assignment through referral through the Counterterrorism Bureau, and then eventually get promoted to the GS-14 level in my current role with the Education and Cultural Affairs Bureau. And all of that wouldn't have been possible without the network. I'm learning from those before me, the diplomats, the foreign service officers, career folks. So the more people I was exposed to, the more I learned about how to navigate government and how to really advance, and also how to identify potential new detail opportunities. And regardless of what agency you land in, those opportunities are what truly matter, because that's going to determine how far you advance and where you go in your career.
Thank you all for sharing. That was really helpful to, sometimes we get caught up in thinking about the program and the application process and the experience, but it's always great to kind of think about how you apply that and how that really sets you up post program participation, fellowship participation. I have one more question, but before I do, I want to be mindful of time. So I'm going to hold to open it up to folks here joining us we want to make sure that we have time for you all to ask all of our panelists questions. So if you all want to go off mute, if you want to type it in the chat, this is the time. I haven't seen any questions come in the chat, but maybe you've been holding on to a burning question. We want to make sure we're addressing them here. So. Questions or just reflections as you're hearing from our panelists today.
We got a shy group today.
Yes, that just means you all were super thorough and they have the information and they're ready to apply.
Yeah. One thing I would add, since we're on here, is when you're initially doing your resume for the PMF program, it's important to really include all the different skill sets and experiences you have that align with the core competencies. But once you become a finalist and you start reaching out to specific recruiters or specific agencies, it's so important that you tailor your resume to the PMF job description. And I mean, literally using the keywords from the description and giving examples of how you have done those things. Because they are looking for folks to fill a specific role and they want to be able to see that you're interested in that role. So something to be aware of. And then also, as you're going through that process of identifying a job once you're a finalist, there might be a situation where you get an offer and you're waiting on maybe your number one agency to give you an offer. And you might be in the running, but you don't know for sure if you're going to get it. And you'll be in a position where you have to decide, do I take the offer in front of me or do I wait for the other offer? And Brandon can provide more background on this, but at least for me at the time, had I accepted one offer, I would be ineligible to be considered for the other offer I was waiting on. So what I ended up doing was asking that agency to give me more time. I was honest with them and let them know that I was being considered for other offers, and I asked how much time would they be able to provide me while I wait so that I can make a decision. And they gave me a deadline, and based on that deadline, I made my decision. But that's important to know.
Thank you for sharing that. And I see that we do have, I believe it's 2 questions that just came in through the chat. First being, would PMF prefer a federal resume style?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'll just kind of build on what Adam just mentioned. So for the application itself, it really doesn't matter what format it's in. It could be a federal resume, it could be a shorter resume, whatever, has all the required elements that are kind of spelled out on the website and the handbook. That's all that really matters for the application stage. But then once you become a finalist, that's when you really think about, all right, I need to start tailoring the resume toward the positions that I'm applying to. And so these days with PMF, you can actually do that for every position that you apply to. You can tailor it based on that, and definitely something that we recommend that you do. So the resume kind of functions in 2 different ways, kind of at the applicant stage and at the finalist stage. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. And then I did see Amar's other question about, is it possible to see the application and start preparing before it opens? So you can't see the application necessarily before it opens, but the applicant handbook does have some sample questions for each of the 3 distinct assessment parts. So that's one thing that you can look at just to kind of be prepared for what it's going to be, what it's going to look like. And the thing that you definitely can and should prepare prior to is the required documentation. So the resume, the transcript, if you need to get an alternative letter to supplement your transcript, that's the number one thing to do as soon as you can, because you don't want to be scrambling during the application period or toward the end to try to get that. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
Thank you. I see that Shiva has their hand up if they want to go off mute.
Hi, thank you everyone for making the time. This is very helpful. So I'm going to do my best to explain my question clearly. but I'm a contractor for FSI. I'm sorry, yeah. And I was wondering, so I know within that year, I have the option to apply for different agencies or different positions. But what if I decide to, just stay within one agency? Let's say, again, I'm a contractor now and I want to pursue, my job with them. How do I go about that? I'm obviously going to apply to other positions as well, just to, have my options open. But what if I decide that, I just want to stay with that agency?
Happy to tackle that one too, if it's helpful. So basically, if you're already working as a federal employee, whether on the contracting side, or working in a different role as a federal employee, in order to start your PMF position, you do have to resign your current position within government. So back in Adam's day and Tracy's day and Israel's day, this was a little bit different, I think, because you could just kind of go directly into whatever position that somebody might reach out to you for, this kind of thing. But these days, there's something called public notice, which basically just means that agencies have to post a position on this mini USA jobs that I talked about, the TMS, for all finalists to have the opportunity to apply to it, right? So so you couldn't, kind of just slide into a PMF position that you're kind of already in. You have to resign that position and then take the newer opportunity. But a place like the State Department, that's one of those agencies that really does post a lot of positions. And so, definitely if you wanted to stay at state, you could have some opportunities to apply to there. And so hopefully that helps. But one thing I'll also do is I'll pop my email in the chat in case there's some more specifics that you want to ask about or talk through. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, and to add to that, once you become a finalist, working at state already, or for any of you who are currently a contractor or part of another agency, you have access to a global address list of every single employee in that agency. So if you see positions posted for that agency, I would recommend reaching out or searching for the office director or someone from that office that you can reach out to and express your interest to via coffee, maybe. You still have to apply, and there'll be a fair and equal competition. Everyone will be considered, but I think it would help, in addition to applying, to emailing someone from that office and grabbing coffee with them and doing that as soon as possible.
Thank you, everyone. And I see, Tracy, you answered the question in the chat. So with the minute we have left, a quick round of just pieces of advice you would share with all the folks here.
One thing I was told before I applied is you don't win the raffle unless you buy the ticket. And I guess applying it here is like, look, whether you're on the fence or whether you want to do it or whether you think, hey, maybe I'm not good enough, just do it. Like, it's better to have options than to look back and say, I should have, could have, but I unfortunately decided not to apply at that time. So if you're thinking about it, just go for it. You never know where it'll take you. I'm very thankful that I did, because it's led me to a good place, and I'll let my colleagues on the panel speak for themselves.
Yeah, I can go next. I think to Brandon's kind of point, I would just be a really good student. So, look at the handbook and really study it. If there's tips in there or things that they're recommending, I would start on those early, because you do only have kind of that short window. And, one of the big things for me when I was applying was studying those competencies and kind of thinking of examples in your own kind of academic or professional background that you could pull from, because ultimately you will be interviewing and they're going to be using that as like their criteria for, judging whether you're a good fit or not. So some folks ask about like, what can I do now? Think about those competencies and think of examples that you could give or write about. And definitely use the PMF ambassadors as a resource. They're essentially people who are volunteering their time to talk to you and see if there's someone that matches, with your background, and pick their brain. It doesn't hurt. Even if you don't apply now, you can use them as a resource next year.
Yeah, to echo Tracy's point, the PMF ambassadors, I would, if possible, reach out and see if they're even willing to review your resume for the application. And when you're taking the assessments, keep the core competencies in mind, especially the behavioral one. And don't just like answer it with your first thought. Really give it some thought before answering every question. Like they give you a pretty lengthy amount of time to complete the assessment. So really take your time and make the most of all the time they give you to provide the response that best answers the question. So, if you look at the core competencies, so look at your ability to communicate persuasively, work well in a team, choose the answers that align most closely with those core competencies. And get the application done as soon as possible. Don't wait till the last minute.
Brandon, any last thoughts or pieces of advice?
I thought those were all excellent points. And in terms of Israel's point, like I agree with that one so much that I just want to add my own +1 to that and say that, like, if you're even considering it remotely, like there's nothing to lose by applying to this and everything to gain. I mean, even if you're in a position or doing something that you currently like, I mean, you got this whole year if you become a finalist to see all these opportunities coming in, and so yeah, I just want to foot stomp what he said and encourage you to throw your hat in the ring and apply if you're thinking about it. And then if you do become a finalist, apply to those positions early, because government, as we all know, especially the executive branch side compared to Congress, it takes a while, right, to get through the background investigation, the whole process. So just start applying right away as soon as you become a finalist. And yeah, again, just wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you, everyone. Again, another virtual round of applause to all of our panelists for being here today. We really do appreciate you giving up your time and talent to share about your experience. And Brandon, thank you so much for joining us and for being accessible. I know that Brandon, Tracy, and Israel, Adam, everyone just dropped their emails in the chat. So please take note of that if you're looking to connect with them individually. Since you all have shared your emails here, I will be sending an email follow-up with some of the resources shared with everyone here today. So I can include your email addresses in there as well. I know sometimes getting this information as we're wrapping up gets to be a little challenging. So I'll make sure that I share that with all of you. And once again, thank you all very much and enjoy the rest of your evening and good luck.
Good luck, everyone. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Brandon.